Hi there, this is Tony Gaddis, author of Starting Out with Java. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can use a loop to step through all of the individual elements in an array. Now, when you're writing programs that work with arrays, you'll commonly find yourself needing to perform the same operation on every element of the array. This is a common thing. For example, suppose we have this array in a program, numbers, which is an array of integers, and we have 5 elements in the array. So in memory, we can think of the array as looking like that. Since it has 5 elements, the subscripts would be 0 through 4. And let's just suppose that we need to store the value 0 in every one of these elements. Well, obviously, one approach would be to write individual statements that make this assignment, like numbers sub 0 equals 0. Okay, well, that would put 0 in the first element. Numbers sub 1 equals 0. Well, that puts 0 here in the second element. But yeah, you're probably starting to think that well, this is going to get old. These are a lot of assignment statements, particularly if the array is large and has a lot of elements. We wouldn't want to write individual assignment statements like this for an array that had 100 elements or 1,000 elements. So there has to be a better way to step through the elements in the array and perform the same operation on each one. Well, fortunately, there is a better approach. A better approach would be to write a loop that iterates one time for each element in the array. For example, in this situation, we have 5 elements in the array, so we would write a loop that iterates 5 times. The first time that the loop iterates, it would store 0 in element 0, and then the second time that the loop iterates, it would store 0 in element 1. The third time, it would store 0 in element 2, and so forth. Now, when a loop works this way, it typically has a variable that holds the subscript for the array element that it is working on. The first time that the loop iterates, this variable would hold the subscript 0. And then the second time that the loop iterates, we would increment that variable so that it holds the value 1. And then during the next iteration, we would increment the variable so that it holds the value 2. So it works this way until it reaches the end of the array. Well, here is an example of a for loop that will perform this operation. Let's take a closer look at the loop. Notice that in the loop we have the variable index, which is initialized to the value 0. At the end of each iteration, index is incremented, and the loop is going to execute as long as index is less than size. Size, of course, is set to the value 5. So as this loop executes, the index variable will take on the values 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And during each iteration, we perform this statement, numbers sub index is equal to 0. So the first time the loop iterates, index is set to 0. So numbers sub 0 equals 0. Then index is incremented. So in the next iteration, numbers sub 1 is set to 0. Then in the next iteration, numbers sub 2 is set to 0. And then numbers sub 3, finally numbers sub 4. When the index variable has the value 5 stored in it, then the test expression will cause the loop to stop. Okay, well, let's look at how this works in an actual program. This is a complete Java program. I've declared the same array that we just looked at. Numbers is an array of 5 integers. And then here's the for loop that we looked at. This steps through the array, assigning 0 to each element. And then after that executes, notice that we have another loop that's set up the same way. index is initialized to 0. The loop iterates as long as index is less than size. At the end of each iteration, index is incremented. Now, when this loop executes, it calls system.out.println to display the contents of numbers subindex. So this loop simply displays the contents of each element in the array. Well, let's compile the program, and let's run the program. And as you can see, the second loop displays the contents of the array, which is 0 in each element. Now, as a further demonstration of this, let's make a slight change to this program. Instead of assigning the value 0, let's assign another value. Let's change that to 77. So now we are storing 77 in each array element. So now when we compile and run this program, we should see 77 instead of 0. And as you can see here, each element of the array is initialized to 77.